American public isn't real good at understanding risk until something bad happens in their community. Of course, in Colorado, we've had enough now in the last 3 years of fires and last year's Front Range flooding to engage people to understand risk, and the risk is all around us.
2 years ago, we had a small fire down the road, and that's when reality really hit, and we thought like, oh my God, panic breaks loose.
After Katrina, we've learned a lot in the United States, and part of that became legislation, i.e. the PETS Act. And the challenge that we have here is how do you evacuate people, get them to evacuate, and take care of their pets?
It is important to save pets along with the people in a disaster, because the people are relying on their connection with those animals. They love them, their animals, as their own family. They're not going to leave their family behind. That puts the people at risk.
We've got the PETS Act helping with the little animals, but some people consider larger animals their little animals. So counties are struggling with then how do they move those animals, then how do they take care of those animals. So technically the livestock are considered property, private property in the state, but I look at these, and most ag producers do, these are my pets, if you will. I take care of them daily, I know each one of them, name them. We really care about our animals.
We enjoy them when everything is fine and you know, happy-go-lucky, but when there's panic and we have to save our own self, and then it's important to also think about our animals, our horses, and no matter if they are high value or not a lot of value, they are our babies, they are our kids, and we need to take care of them.
We're encouraging counties then to work with the ag agents and the animal control folks and look at both large animals as well as small animals, and make sure that they do have a plan that's tied to their county emergency operations plan.
Routt County is an intermountain community in northwestern Colorado, about 14,000 people. We have the biggest population center is in Steamboat Springs, but most people live out in rural Routt County.
In a rural community, you have to understand that pets aren't just going to be dogs and cats. They're also going to be goats, they're going to be horses, they're going to be sheep, and possibly chickens. So that is something to consider when you're doing your evacuation planning.
Our path for animal disaster planning really started in the drought of 2012. It was obvious to myself, to my ranching friends, and to the people in the county that we had some real wildfire potential. And so we started at that time figuring out what resources we had, what resources we needed, and how we could get those resources in action as quickly as possible.
The drought and the dead beetle killed trees made me aware of how dangerous it was out here for wildfires, and that's when we started looking deeper into what we can do to protect our valuable place up here. Right?
We were able to get together and get a template through Pet Aid, and with that we did some tabletop discussions, and then from there we're able to kind of establish who would be responsible for certain parts of that.
We all had to figure out who is really doing what. This is what the plan says, but now let's put it into some sort of action.
Last year, you might remember, we were just getting ready for this sale and a large fire blew up over here on the cog.
Imagine, it's the busiest day of the year for a county extension agent. It is the night of your junior livestock sale at your county fair. People are coming in from all over, all of your supporters, people coming in to buy animals, and there's a wildfire that has broken out just a few miles from your fairgrounds. And you are the person in charge of the evacuation of livestock, of pets, and your place of evacuation is your fairgrounds. How do you manage that? It's not a big deal if you've got a plan in place, you've got the right people in place, and you've got the resources. And that's what happened to us. What could have been a terrible situation turned out to be one of our finest hours.
I was working that day for the sheriff's office. We came down to the fairgrounds. We started setting up some sheltering options for evacuated livestock and house pets.
Setting up a small animal shelter in a disaster situation is sort of like putting a puzzle together on a whim. If you don't know what you have ahead of you, you have to plan hoping you're getting it right. You always have to know, you kind of have to know your community to kind of know what animals you're going to be getting, but at the same time you have to be willing to open the idea that you're going to completely be wrong and have to redo your whole plan.
You know, there are so many resources available out there that can help lead you and your community through the steps on how to make an animal sheltering disaster evacuation plan. But it really takes that personal connection in a community to gather those resources and customize it for your community in order to make it effective.
So a community that's just trying to get started in this game, you start out with a planning process or a planning meeting to try to figure out are the right players in the room. And clearly you want to start out with the county emergency manager who's responsible for the county's plan, the animal control type people. If you have a humane organization, you want them involved. You want the ag agent, a couple of ag agents, and get the right people in a room and make sure everybody understands that we have the right people. Then you can start the process.
So the next step in our process, now we've got the plans, it's practice, and we need to keep practicing, keeping our county animal response team fresh, keeping them understanding what we're going to do when the next situation arises, and also a big outreach and push for education of the individual horse owner, animal owner, pet owner. What do they need to have ready?
So in the emergency management world, the most important part that we can have is not the plan sitting on a shelf collecting dust, but the planning process. That process has to come together to create the togetherness, the will, the trust, and the enabling powers then to allow a county, once an evacuation's occurring and sheltering's needed, to actually work.
Larimer County is a large county in Colorado. It's about 2,600 square miles, and it has about a population of 300,000 people, both rural and urban. We have about 80,000 households that have pets. With that number, it's very important that each of those households has a plan for their pets and has a process to go for evacuation and for sheltering of their animals.
So the more prepared a person is for a disaster, both for themselves and the animal, the better we can help them.
Over the past 40 years, Larimer County has experienced a number of devastating disasters that have impacted the county.
We're second in the state for wildfire. Flooding is obviously a hazard every year.
With the growing population in Larimer County, the county commissioners realize that it's very important for them to not only maintain the emergency management plan that they have in place for people's safety, but to expand on it.
During disasters, when people are separated from their homes, the first thing that they want to do is get some normalcy. And everyday normalcy for all of us who have animals is having your family and your animals around them.
During the 2013 flood here in Colorado, we had over 1,700 people that were airlifted out by the Colorado National Guard. And amongst those, we also had 800 pets with those people that were also airlifted out.
The ranch is a great place for emergency response because it truly is the people's facility. So anytime we can activate and take care of the community, we're ready, willing, and able to do it.
I organize how the entire shelter is set up, everything from where it's going to be and the logistics behind it, as well as helping to organize the volunteers and the care of all of the animals.
So incident management involves a lot of large facilities that we need for different teams and different functions. We here in Larimer County have the ranch complex, which is an excellent partner for us because they allow us to shelter both small animals and large animals together with people in one location.
One of the things we noticed in Hyde Park Fire, when we had folks here for upwards of 3 to 4 weeks, part of their healing and part of their comfort was to be able to be with their animals and be with their neighbors. So we always made sure that all the policies and procedures that we had in place during that time was very open to let them come. They could feed their animals, they could water their animals, they could take their animals out for a ride, and then they could go take care of the nasty business of having to get their insurance and all their property stuff taken care of.
The largest failure for evacuation is the fact that people are not willing to leave their animals behind. So if we do try to evacuate people, they will try to come back into the area to get their animals, or they won't leave without them if we ask them to go.
over 85% of animal owners would risk their lives to save their animals. You see so many people who would run into a house to save their animal or run into the mud to save their horse.
One of the things that they've learned in a lot of disasters is people do not prepare for their animals. They do not have crates, they do not have food, they do not have medications. And so trying to get those folks to understand in advance of an emergency what they need to do for their animals. And in the case of horses, oftentimes they found that horses have been in pastures for years and years. The horses, they did not know how to load into a trailer.
A little forward, little tiny forward, come just a little forward towards you. And that's total relief.
And so that was a problem. So thinking about your animals in advance of a disaster and what needs to be done should you have to evacuate them.
Larimer Humane Society is actually the lead agency in responding to disasters when it comes to companion animals for Larimer County.
These are the small ones and those are the larger size.
To expand our capacity, the first thing we did is we actually received a Homeland Security grant for our emergency response trailer. And then we also discovered that we needed to be able to expand our human capacity as well. And that's part of why we've been expanding the DART, the Disaster Animal Response Team, so that we have a core of trained volunteers who can help us during a disaster.
We have a great resource with our DART team. We have a trailer with supplies ready to go to set up an animal shelter. Everything needed to care for animals, food and water bowls, litter pans, leashes, name tags and collars.
Hi, pleasure.
One of the things for volunteers working with animals is they have to have some subject matter expertise to know how to handle those animals, which animals can be together versus those animals that have to be kept apart. The other side of this is the first response entities who are actually in the field and actually respond to these disasters also have to have that awareness of the various different animals that they might be dealing with, and also the training and exercising regarding how do you handle those animals during an emergency when they're stressed and under pressure. How do you actually get them to safety?
First responders and firefighters are definitely trained in handling animals. Most of us, number one, have our own animals, so we do know how to deal with that, and we know how important they are to the homeowner.
There's always more that we can do. Training and exercise, planning and preparedness are things that we need to do year after year in order to keep the volunteers and the partners and the networks strong. They need to work together regularly.
Well, animal disaster plans are a living document. There's no way to write a plan and then put it on a shelf and have it be fresh and available and relevant 2-3 years down the road. So what you do to keep it relevant is you exercise. And one of the things we do for an exercise for relevancy of a plan is to do a tabletop exercise. I've got this covered. So a tabletop exercise brings in all the players. It brings in emergency management, it brings in fire, police, it brings in the animal sheltering folks, brings in the animal first responders, and we present a scenario, a disaster scenario that says, we really need to put all these players together to find a solution for the problem the disaster has caused.
One of our best partners is the CSU Extension because they are able to connect people to information. And we cannot get enough of that during a disaster because there's such a need from the public to get information about what's going on, what they're able to do, and what the responders are doing for them.
It's something that we do. It's the outreach that we have in Extension and working with the general public and working with our elected officials that this is a very natural role for Extension to be involved in.
So in order to have emergency preparedness and response work, we really need to have the Extension offices involved pre-disaster so that they're part of the planning process, they're one of our partners ahead of time, and then they can establish those connections before we ever have anything occur.
If you happen to be a community that does not have a disaster response plan, I would highly recommend you reaching out to other communities that have gone through the processes like we have in Larimer County. Because honestly, there is no better way to learn than actually going through it. It's not a situation you can learn in a book. You can't learn online or on the web. Our experience has been just firsthand knowledge. And then also reaching out to some of the surrounding agencies that that are going to be working with you, because they all have different goals and objectives as they're working through a disaster, and you have to be able to work together.
We aren't subject matter experts in everything, so when we're talking about animal evacuation, we have to depend upon the people who deal with animal evacuation or animals on a daily basis.
It can sound daunting, But the ability to respond to the needs in your community is incredibly satisfying, and not being able to respond is actually far more disappointing.
In our complex environment, we're never going to see the same disaster twice. Therefore, every disaster is going to give us lessons learned for the next disaster, and our plan is never going to be done. Therefore, we're always going to be training our volunteers and our responders. We're always going to be exercising the plan and changing that plan as needed to ensure that it's ready for the next disaster.